So good morning. I had a complete talk planned for this morning, and then I was watching the news the other day, and I saw the news about what happened in New Zealand. And I just thought, I have to start with that. Because the first thing I heard was there was a mass shooting, and I thought, oh, no. And then they said 49 was the initial count of victims, 49, and I'm like, oh my God, just like Pulse. Like, that is like so close to home. And then they were talking about where it happened, and they said it happened in Christ Church, and I'm like, a Unity Church? I was like, what? And they said, no, that was the name of the town, Christ Church. It was in a mosque, but that was the name of the town. And I'm like, this is really hitting close to home. You know, they have our name. They have the same number of victims. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. And I started thinking, what do I do with this? You know? And my talk today is on judging, and then I looked at, Reverend Alice was talking last week about what numbers mean, especially in the Hebrew Bible. And 49 is 7 times 7, and 7 is the number of completion. And so I kept saying, this is not just complete, it's complete times complete, which means enough is enough is enough. Stop it. No more. There's my 49. No more. Something has to change. Something has to be different. Something has to be shifted. This can't keep happening. Enough is enough. It's over. It's complete. It's done. It's done. We need a new way of looking at it, which, thank God, ties right into what I want to talk about, which is judging. And I want to talk about judging because it ties into our Lenten season. Because for Lent, we're talking about in unity, it's that release, that letting go of what no longer serves us. And that can be a way of acting. It can be a way of talking. It can be a way of thinking. It can be a set of beliefs. It can be anything that you're carrying with you, a grudge, a hurt that no longer serves you because it's preventing you from moving forward. Because we're looking towards Easter to that resurrecting power, that reawakening, that renewal of the awareness of the Christ presence within and all of the gifts that comes with that. But for something to come in, sometimes we've filled our lives up with so much stuff, we've got no room. So we need to let go of some things. I mean, I always go back to the image of packing for a trip, you know, and you just think you're going to have the best vacation in the world, and you pack everything that you're going to need, everything that you might think you might need, everything that you're not sure that you'll need, and anything that somebody else might need, you're going to put in your suitcase, and it takes 4 of you to get it closed, and you finally get it zipped, and you put it down, and you're ready to go, and you look over, and you go like, the outfit that's the reason for the trip is hanging right there. That has to go. That's the most important part. It ain't going in there without something in there coming out. Something has to move to make room for what's really important. And that's where forgiveness comes in. Forgiveness is a way of releasing those old hurts, releasing those things that no longer serve us, of releasing those people that we've dragged through our whole life with us from our past because something they did, something that just couldn't quite forgive them for. And so I wanted to talk about that scenario of, you know, just taking something that happened to you and through your whole life and just not being able to forgive it. It can be anything really significant and big or something really small. And I was looking back at what I've carried through my entire life, and one of the things that occurred to me was the topic of bullying. And I wanted to use that because I was bullied in grade school. And I saw my kids bullied in grade school. And I realized, unfortunately, that might just be part of grade school, and it probably happens to most of us. Anybody be bullied? Anything happen in elementary school that you didn't like? We all had it. But did we do what I did and build a box around it, judge it big time, and then make it immovable? I mean, I had kids call me names, and it wasn't physical. It was all just verbal. But it hurt me, and it caused me pain, and so from that perspective, I judged them wrong. They were wrong. I was innocent. And they did something horrible. How could they? And then I put this perimeter around it, and it was nice and thick and solid and weighed a ton, and that's the way it was because that's what happened, and that's what I judged the outcome to be. And I drug that big, heavy box through my whole life. I got into my teens, and I'm thinking, yeah, those kids probably in the public school are flunking out because they're awful people. And when I went to college, it was like, yeah, they're probably not even going to college because they're awful people what they did to me. And believe it or not, I carried it on after that. I'm thinking, they're divorced by now. Their marriages have failed. They are probably at entry-level jobs, make a minimum wage doing manual labor, and will never rise above that in states because they are awful people. And so for 30 years, I've carried this with, and I'm dragging this, and I'm like, okay, look at this from a little different perspective. Because what I realized was, with a change of perspective, maybe forgiveness is possible. So I thought, okay, I judged it to happen this way. And judge comes from a Greek word, and it means actually to sift or to separate. And when you sift and separate things, then you start to divide them and value them. And then once you put a value on it, judge also means to rule, to rise above. So I took their actions and their beings and separated them from me and then put a higher value on me and then said, I'm above them, and tried to rule over the situation. But now I look back and I go, and think of a situation where you're, haven't quite forgiven somebody because of exactly what happened at that moment. And think, am I sure? Are you? Are you sure that's exactly what happened? Could there be something else that was going on there that you didn't know? Could there be some other reason that something happened that you weren't quite aware of? Did you play a different part of it than what you thought you did? And what I was looking back at this situation, and I was like, well, I was completely innocent. I was just this poor kid, in elementary school who was just trying to figure out his place in the world, who was uncomfortable in social situations, who was trying to figure out who was my friend and who wasn't, who wanted to be popular like everybody else did, and who didn't know how to, get along with absolutely everybody. But they were horrible people. Or were they just trying to figure out their place in the world, who were afraid they didn't fit in, who just wanted to be popular? They were kind of just like me. And what would it take for me to do what they did? If I was in that situation, what would have to happen for me to do that? And I thought, well, it's pretty common that if you want to make yourself feel better, a really bad way of doing it is to make somebody else feel worse. And then you rise above them, that you separate them out from you. And I thought, oh, I think I did that too. I can remember doing that to the other kids in school when I was in elementary school. So now the sifting that I've done and the separation and the valuing starts to come back together. And I thought, now what other possible reason could any of this have for happening? And could I have had any part of it? And I was looking back, and I found a few things. And I was actually getting ready to I was looking up stuff for a talk that I want to do on Father's Day. And I'm going through some old memorabilia and some old boxes, and I find this stuff from when I was in grade school, and I've got old report cards in there and all kinds of stuff that's in there, and I find this piece of paper that is an evaluation from the standardizing tests I took in middle school. And it said, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm saying this to explain what happened to me, is it said that my score on a nationwide basis was the 93rd percentile. I wish I still had all of those brain cells, but I gave some of them up in my 20s. But But so I'm reading this, and it's like to my parents, and it's on this little dot matrix printout, whatever, and it says, this means that your child has scored as well as or better than 93% of all the kids who took this test nationwide. And 7% did as well or better. And I thought, yeah, grade school is pretty easy for me, you know? So, I'm a smart kid. I was a smart kid. I didn't really have to do too much to get good grades in elementary school. Like I said, that's my past. That's behind me. Struggle a little bit harder now. Point 2 is, I have buffed up since grade school. Let me tell you what. I am so much wider than I used to be because when I was in grade school, you could see through me. I was about that big around, but I was fairly tall. So here's this brainiac kind of kid who has, having a pretty easy time in school, that's as skinny as a rail. Think Big Bang Theory here. And, they're not having as easy a time in school as I am. And then I had one more thing to throw into the mix. When I was in elementary school, my mom let me pick out my book bag. So I went to the store and I picked out a book bag. And I didn't just pick out any book bag. I picked out one in the shape of a briefcase. A briefcase. So I've got a satchel. And I didn't just pick out any satchel because I picked my favorite color. I picked out an orange satchel. So I was going to school as this skinny, tall kid that weighed about 17 pounds, getting straight A's and carrying a bright orange satchel with my books in it. I would have made fun of me. Seriously, who wouldn't? You'd be like, really? And that was just an example of probably many fashion faux pas I made in elementary school that would make people call me out from across the crowd. And I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm partially responsible here. I am partially responsible for kind of what happened to me. And that's not to say, and I don't want to make too much light of it, because what they did was not nice. And what they did inflicted pain on me. And I might have done that to other people, which I apologize for too. But I also can learn from that, make sure it never happens again, not do it to anyone else, and make sure no one else ever does it to me. So that's not making light of what they did. What they did was what they did. But with that being said, I can start to separate what they did from who they are. I take a different perspective on who they are. Because in Unity, we teach that God is everywhere present. We say that in our opening prayer every week. God is all good, everywhere present. And our second principle is that means I'm part of God and I'm good too. And everyone else is part of God and good. So Shannon is good, and Rory is good, and Harold is good. Each one of you are good. But in my mind, I was saying, but not the bullies. Not them. I cut them out and put them in a box with a wall around it, and nope, they weren't. But with a change of perspective, forgiveness becomes possible. Suddenly, I'm seeing them as just kids who did something that wasn't nice, but the action I have a problem with. The people, not so much. And honestly, I can't even remember most of their names now. I have no idea where they are. I have no idea how successful they became. But I had painted that picture and kept them over there in that box. And I was the only one carrying the box around. They weren't. They have no idea. But with a change of perspective, forgiveness is possible. And I can forgive them, the people. Not necessarily the action, but the people. And what does that do for me? What does that do for me? What does that give me? Well, like that suitcase where you take something out that you're never going to use on that trip, you can start putting important stuff in. You can get everything in there that you really need. And that's what Easter is about too, is bringing in something good, something new. And when you unjudge someone, when I unjudge them for what they did, when I unjudge me for my part in it, when I unjudge the situation, everything kind of shifts. I just unjudge it. It happened. This is what happened to me. This is what they did. This is how I dealt with it. This is how it affected. This is how I learned. This is how I grew. But I can look at it without judgment. I unjudge them, and I unjudge me. I unjudge us in all of it. And I can take that into like when I leave here and I'm driving down the road because I've recently done this, and somebody comes flying past me and cuts me off in traffic and takes off, and I'm like, are you crazy? You're going to kill somebody. And I think, is that really true? Because are they trying to get to the hospital to save somebody? I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but boy, I can make a judgment just that quick. Or from a different perspective saying, I don't know. I moved over a little bit. They went on their way. No judgment. No judgment. And there's a real famous quote in the Bible that everyone hears when it comes to judge. And it's in Luke. And it's a section where Jesus is talking about just judging others. And basically says, don't do it. Don't do it. Do not judge. This is Luke chapter 6, verse 37. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. But change the emphasis. Use a different perspective. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Because we often think of judgment when it comes to this passage as if you judge someone else, God's waiting. Get to the pearly gates, and he's got the book. And there's tick marks in both columns, because that's the way I was taught. Come judgment day, you're going to get judged by God at that day. But maybe not. Maybe what Jesus is saying in that passage is, in the instant when you judge, you also have to judge yourself. You are judging others and judging yourself. It happens in the moment. It's not payback time later on. You pass a judgment on everybody. If you don't judge someone else, you're not placing judgment on yourself. You're not walling yourself in. You're not making yourself something absolute, like I had made them absolutely wrong. It doesn't make you absolutely right either. It doesn't make you absolutely a victim. It doesn't make you anything. It just makes something that happened to you. And if you don't judge them, you don't judge yourself. Judgment happens in the moment. And if we don't make a judgment about someone, maybe we just deal with the situation and there's nothing to forgive. Because I haven't put them in a box. I don't know. It's a different perspective. With a different perspective, forgiveness is possible. And when forgiveness is possible, I can let go. And I can release. And then I can move on. And I'm open and willing and aware for whatever's next coming into me, whatever's the best. And I look at that time in my life, because it used to be, I had a horrible childhood. I was bullied in grade school. It was bad. They were mean to me. And if I let that go, I have space to remember. I loved being in the science room. I loved being a part of the guitar group at school. I remember the other friends that I had. I remember the vacations at that time period I took with my family. I can remember all the good things that happened because that big ugly stumbling block that I couldn't get past, it's gone. Moved out of the way. And in that instance, I have room for more memories. But in a bigger way, on my spiritual life, when I do the forgiveness work, I open myself up to say, okay, I've got more room for just love, for just kindness, for joy. And I'm all about that. I think that's what Easter is going to be for us. As we let go in this Lenten season of everything that no longer serves us, we open ourselves up, we make room. We take something out of the glass so that we can pour in something that tastes better. Consider that. A change of perspective makes forgiveness possible. A change in perception makes forgiveness possible. Let's ground that in a little time of meditation. I invite you to set aside everything you may be holding on to. I invite you to just relax into this moment. To take a deep breath and just let go. So we say, thank you for this moment of awareness. Thank you for just considering the possibility that I can release something I've been holding on to. Just feel the willingness to want to let go. To be open to a change in perception. Just breathe in that loving presence and relax into this moment. I release and I let go. I release the tension in my body. I release the stress in my mind. I release and make room for all that is good and holy. I make room for my desires to be fulfilled. I release. I release. I release. For a moment in the silence, just let go. I find the joy in letting go. I find the peace in allowing myself to release. I open myself up with anticipation to receive all God's good for me. There is room in my mind, my heart, my body, and my soul for more love, for more joy, for more of all that I desire. In this moment, during this hour, for this day, and throughout my lifetime. And so it is.